Hello everyone, welcome to Bajirao IAS Academy, the Hindu news analysis. Today is 11th March 2024. So in today's lecture, we will be discussing about a very important news articles that are covered in the Hindu newspaper. So the first very important news article that is being given in the Hindu newspaper is Arun Goel quits as election commissioner ahead of Lok Sabha polls, right? So the Election Commission of India to declare the Lok Sabha schedule, right? So in this backdrop, the election commissioner Arun Goel, he was one of the election commissioners. We all know that Election Commission of India is a multi-member body, right? So when I say multi-member body, it essentially comprises one chief election commissioner plus two election commissioners, right? So therefore, since election commission is a multi-member body, one of the member of the election commission of India was resigned. Okay, so in this context, we will understand the composition of election commission and the powers, functions of the election commission of India, and the removal of the election commissioners. And in this backdrop, we will also understand the recently passed law that has made the appointment of election commissioner of India more independent. Okay, so that was in the backdrop of recent Supreme Court judgment as well. So with the resignation of Mr. Goel as the election commissioner, now the election commission, which was known as a multi-member body, was now left with only one chief election commissioner, who is Mr. Rajiv Kumar. Okay, why? Because so earlier the other election commissioner of the Election Commission of India, Mr. Anup Chandra Pandey, retired in February. So because of this reason, the Election Commission of India now have only one member, that is Chief Election Commissioner Mr. Rajiv Kumar. So we will understand this going ahead. So the next important news article is with respect to India and EFTA, that is European Free Trade Area, okay, Trade and Economic Partnership Agreement. So we will also understand this in a detailed manner. Why it is significant, why it is very important. So in recent times, if you look at India, India has been signing the free trade agreements with previous number of countries. Previously, India signed this free trade agreement with Australia. So we all know about that. And apart from signing this with Australia, India also signed this with the United Arab Emirates. So in a similar manner, European Union is one of the important trade blocs for India. Okay, so because if you look at India's trade with European Union and other Western countries, India has been enjoying positive trade surplus. So because of this reason, it is very important that India has inked a pact with the EFTA. Okay, so this is actually first time that India is signing a free trade agreement with 4 developed nations. So once with the 4 developed countries. Okay, so at a single go, this is for the first time that India has been signing such a free trade agreement. So the free trade agreement will actually provide a window for the Indian exporters to access large European and the global markets. Please remember, I have already told you that India has been experiencing, or India is having, a positive surplus with respect to trade with the European Union countries. So because of this reason, it is very important that India signing a free trade agreement with 4 developed countries at one go. Later, we will also understand about the gig workers and gig workforce. So one of the study has highlighted that gig workers have been suffering lack of social security, as well as there are lack of regulations with respect to employment of gig workers. Now we will also briefly understand that why gig workers lack the social security, what is the nature of this gig workforce, and what are the steps and what are the measures that the governments have to be taken in order to provide social security for the gig workers. Okay, so if you briefly go into the details about these gig workers and the study, so a study of an app, so it is based on the workers, app based workers. For example, gig, we talk about Zomato, we talk about Swiggy. So they are actually considered as app-based workers. So this shows that they work a very long periods of time, but if you compare their working conditions or their work with the pay, it is very less. It is very minute. So with just 68% of drivers saying that their expenses have actually exceeded their earnings. So therefore, in this context, it is very important that we need to relook at the gig workforce. We need to provide social security, and we should also regulate the gig work. So we will also deeply understand that in the later part of this lecture. And firstly, we need to understand about the Election Commission of India. So please remember, earlier I have told you that the Mr. Arun Goel quits as Election Commissioner of Election Commissioner ahead of the polls. Now in this context, we will try and understand about the Election Commission of India. Okay, so as we already knew that Mr. Arun Goel quits as the Election Commissioner ahead of the Lok Sabha polls or general elections. So this has reduced the poll body or poll panel, that is Election Commission of India. Election Commission of India. So this is also known as poll body. Okay. So this has reduced the Election Commission of India to a panel of single member. So why? Because earlier the Election Commissioner Mr. Rajiv Kumar already retired from the Election Commission of India. So because of this reason, only the Chief Election Commissioner left in the Election Commission of India. So because of this reason, the poll panel has become a single member body. However, earlier we have understood that the Election Commission of India is a multi-member body. Okay, so multi-member body in the sense that it has one Chief Election Commissioner and 2 election commissioners. So because of this reason, it is known as a multi-member body. Now, the resignation of Mr. Arun Goel left many raised eyebrows as no official reason were given. Okay, so in fact, the resignation is accepted by the President Draupadi Murmu. So we will also understand about that, because whenever the election commissioner wanted to resign, he should submit his resignations to the president. Okay, so in this case, President Draupadi Murmu has also accepted the resignation of Mr. Arun Goel as election commissioner. Now in this context, we will understand briefly about the Election Commission of India. Okay, so Election Commission of India. So Election Commission of India is a permanent and independent body, right? So this is a permanent as well as the independent body, and this particular body is constituted by the Constitution of India. Okay, so because it is constituted by the Constitution of India, it is considered as a constitutional agency, constitutional organization, because Article 324 of the Indian Constitution has provides for the establishment of the Election Commission of India. However, one thing that you have to understand here, the purpose of constituting the Election Commission of India is to conduct free and fair elections. Okay, free and fair elections without any prejudice, any bias against any particular political party or any particular individual. So we have a functional democracy. For every functional democracy, conducting free and fair elections is very important, and in India's case, we can say that the Election Commission of India is largely successful in upholding or strengthening democracy through ensuring free and fair elections. Okay, so on the other hand, please understand Article 324 of the Indian Constitution has provided for the establishment of Election Commission of India. Okay, so here you have to understand that the Election Commission of India conduct elections to Lok Sabha, it conduct elections to Lok Sabha, Rajya Sabha, Office of President, as well as Office of President, as well as Office of Vice President, Along with that, it also conduct elections to state legislature. Okay, state legislature. So for the purpose of conducting elections to these different organizations or these different offices, the Election Commission of India was constituted under Article 324 of the Constitution. Okay, so apart from this, the Election Commission of India also performs, or it has powers with respect to superintendence, direction and control of elections. Okay, so this is what the Election Commission of India do under Article 324 of the Indian Constitution, apart from conducting elections to different offices. So if I can repeat, the Election Commission of India conduct elections to the Lok Sabha and to the Rajya Sabha, to the office of President as well as the office of Vice President and the state legislative assembly, in case if it has the legislative council. So the Election Commission of India conducts elections to legislative council as well. Okay, so these are certain powers and functions of the Election Commission of India and its constitutionality. So after that, we should briefly discuss about the composition of Election Commission of India, how Election Commission of India is being composed of. So as I have already told you that the Election Commission of India is a multi-member body. Okay, so multi-member body in the sense that it does not have only one election commissioner who is chief election commissioner. Rather, along with the chief election commissioner, it also consists of other two election commissioner who assist the chief election commissioner in his functions. Okay, so on the other hand, so it is clearly mandated that the number of election commissioners to the Election Commission of India would be decided by the president, or it would be fixed by the president, if there is a time arises, if there is any requirement. Okay, so president may from time to time fix the number of election commissioners to this particular Election Commission of India. So however, here you have to understand that the election commissioners would assist the chief election commissioner in his functions. Okay, so this particular appointment of the election commissioner as well as chief election commissioners is made by the president. So we will also discuss about the reforms undertaken with respect to the appointment of the Election Commissioner of India. Okay, so here the president may also appoint, after consultation with the election commission, so the regional election commissioners. So regional election commissioner, in a way that they ensure free and fair elections at the different levels. Okay, or at the regional levels. So regional election commissioners are also appointed by the president after consultation with the Election Commission of India. Okay, so these regional commissioners essentially do the work of assisting the Election Commission of India in its performance of duties. Okay, so apart from that, Election Commission has been functioning as a multi-member body and it consists of 3 election commissioners, as I have already discussed about this. Okay, so the Chief Election Commissioner, who is CEC, Chief Election Commissioner, and 2 other election commissioners, they have equal powers. So please understand, both Chief Election Commissioner as well as the election commissioners will have equal powers. However, you cannot guarantee that there is no difference in opinion while taking any decisions between the election commissioners and the chief election commissioners. So please understand, this is a 3-member body. So there is a scope for the differences between the election commissioner as well as chief election commissioner. So therefore, in this context, in case of any difference between the chief election commissioner and the election commissioner, then the matter would be decided by the commission through majority. Okay, so whoever have the majority, so as per the majority, the matter will be decided. Okay, so this is what in case of any difference, that would be resolved through the majority between the members in the Election Commission of India. However, if we talk about the term of office of the election commissioner and chief election commissioners. So they hold office for a period of 6 years or 65 years. So whichever is earlier, right? So they hold office for a period of 6 years or 65 years, whichever is earlier. So before expiry of term, they can be either resigned. Okay, so they can submit their resignation to the president. Okay, so in this case, Mr. Arun Goel had submitted the resignation to the president, or they can be removed also. How they can be removed? So they can be removed on the same grounds. They can be removed on the same grounds with the same procedure as the removal of judge of the Supreme Court. Okay, so this is considered as a rigorous procedure of removing the election commissioners. Okay, so through this procedure they can be removed from the office before actually expiry of their term. Now after that, recently Supreme Court had made several attempts. Supreme Court made several attempts to enhance the independence of the election commission. So why independence of the election commission? Because earlier just executive used to recommend the names for the appointment of chief election commissioner plus election commissioner. Okay, so this is we cannot say that the Election Commission of India is independent, because ultimately the executive has been controlling the appointment of election commissioner as well as the chief election commissioner. So we cannot say that it is free from any kind of a bias. Okay, so there was a petition that was filed in the Supreme Court to enhance the independence of the Election Commission of India, because it ensures free and fair elections as well as upholds and strengthens democracy. However, in this particular judgment, the Supreme Court has essentially emphasized on the independent role of the Election Commission of India. Okay, so it wanted to make Election Commission of India an independent body. How it wanted to make Election Commission of India an independent body free from the executive control? So it has taken certain directions from the earlier appointed committees. Those committees were appointed for the purpose of electoral reforms. Okay, so number of committees that were earlier appointed for the purpose of electoral reforms. So those committees include the Dinesh Goswami committee. Okay, so there was a Dinesh Goswami committee on the electoral reforms that was appointed in the year 1990, and after that there was also a law commission report, that is 255th report of the law commission on electoral reforms. So that was also submitted in the year 2015. Okay, so based on the recommendations of this committee, the Supreme Court has held that the chief election commissioner as well as election commissioners will be appointed by a committee, and that particular committee will consist of, okay, so will be appointed by a committee. Okay, so that particular committee will consist of Prime Minister of India, next Chief Justice of India, and then the leader of opposition in the Lok Sabha. Okay, so it is a 3 member committee, and this particular committee will recommend the name to the president for the appointment as the chief election commissioner or election commissioner. So ultimately it ensures the independence of the Election Commission of India. So however, here the center has passed a law. Okay, so the other thing that we need to understand here, until and unless the parliament passes a specific law which has been mandating the appointment of the election commissioner and chief election commissioner, this particular framework would be valid. On the other hand, after this judgment, the Parliament of India had passed a particular legislation. The legislation was the Chief Election Commissioner and Election Commissioners Appointment, Conditions of Service, Terms of Office Bill 2023. Okay, so Parliament has passed this particular legislation, so that has that has taken the place of the earlier Supreme Court judgment. So please remember what Supreme Court has said. Supreme Court has clearly said the three-member committee would be valid until the Parliament comes up with a new legislation which mandates the appointment of the election commissioner as well as the chief election commissioner, right? So the Parliament has passed the chief election commissioner and other election commissioners appointment, conditions of service and terms of office bill 2023. Okay, so this particular bill has replaced the election commission conditions of service of election commissioners and transaction bill or act 1991. Okay, so this was replaces, or this particular legislation has replaced this earlier passed act of the Parliament. Okay, so this legislation has mandated that the chief election commissioner plus election commissioner will be appointed by the president. Okay, so they will be appointed by the president. However, they will be appointed on the recommendation, on the basis of recommendations of a select committee or a selection committee. Now, so please understand, earlier committee was the Chief Justice of India, Prime Minister of India as leader of opposition in the Lok Sabha. However, this particular legislation has mandated that the Prime Minister of India, leader of opposition in the Lok Sabha, plus the cabinet minister. Okay, so the recommendations of the committee here, the other thing that we need to understand, the recommendations of this particular committee would be valid even with the absence of one member in that committee. Okay, so the selection committee will consist of Prime Minister, Union Cabinet Minister, leader of opposition in the Lok Sabha, as well as, so leader of opposition in the sense that largest opposition party in Lok Sabha, because that in order to be recognized as the leader of opposition party, one particular party must get at least 10% of the seats in Lok Sabha. So therefore, the largest party in Lok Sabha would be chosen, the leader of opposition would be chosen from the largest opposition party in the Lok Sabha. So here one important condition that we need to understand, that the recommendations of the selection committee will be valid even when there is a vacancy in the committee. For example, imagine leader of opposition is not part of this particular committee. The Prime Minister and the Cabinet Minister can recommend the names to the President for the appointment as election commissioners as well as chief election commissioners. So here the other thing you need to understand is that still there is executive majority in the appointment of the election commissioner as well as the chief election commissioners. So it is being criticized that this particular legislation would deviate the independence of the poll body, because this particular legislation still maintains the executive control over the appointment of the election commissioner. Okay, so however, in this context, it is very important that the Election Commission of India's independence have to be protected. That ensures free and fair elections, and that could further strengthen the democracy and ensures functional democracy in a country like India. Okay, so that's all about the Election Commission of India and resignation of Mr. Arun Goel as the election commissioner. So next we will briefly discuss about India and EFTA, European Free Trade Arrangement, Trade and Economic Partnership Agreement. Okay, so India has signed this particular free trade agreement with 4 developed countries. Okay, so with 4 developed countries in the European Union. So this free trade agreement is very important for India. Okay, so why it is important, we will discuss in the later part of this lecture going ahead. Now please understand what is a free trade agreement. So number of countries have been signing the free trade agreement. Now India itself have been signed a free trade agreement with a number of countries. So free trade agreement is actually a pact. Okay, so this is actually a pact between 2 or more nations that reduces barriers to imports and exports among them. Okay, so when you consider trade, there are a number of barriers between different countries. Okay, two different countries. So barriers, when I say barriers, we have customs, excise, and apart from sanitary and phytosanitary measures. So all these things are considered as the barriers to the trade between two different countries. So therefore the free trade agreement ultimately ensures that there is a free trade in goods and services between different countries, and for that particular purpose India has signed this free trade agreement, right? Now please understand, India European Free Trade Association, so this has signed India European Free Trade Association, that is EFTA. Okay, European Free Trade Association. So they have signed this trade and economic partnership agreement. Okay, so this is trade and economic partnership agreement. On the other hand, this can also be considered as the free trade agreement, right? So India has been working on this free trade, working on a trade and economic partnership agreement with the European Free Trade Association. Okay, so India has been working a free trade agreement with the European Free Trade Association. So this European Free Trade Association essentially comprises of countries such as Switzerland, Iceland, Norway, as well as Liechtenstein. Okay, so these were the 4 countries which are part of the European Free Trade Association. Okay, so India has signed this trade and economic partnership agreement with the European Free Trade Association. Clear? Now this European Free Trade Association is an intergovernmental organization, and that was established or set up in the year 1960. Okay, so what is the objective of setting up this European Free Trade Association? It will promote the free trade and economic integration for the benefit of these 4 member countries. Okay, so this will promote free trade as well as the economic integration that benefits these 4 countries. What are those 4 countries? They are Switzerland, Iceland, Norway, and this Liechtenstein. Now in this context, we need to understand the significance of this particular free trade agreement. Okay, so for the first time in the history of free trade agreements, there is a binding commitment. So, okay, so there's a binding commitment from these countries of $100 billion worth of investment and 1 million direct jobs in the next 15 years. Okay, so here you need to understand the binding commitment. So that is being done as part of this particular free trade agreement. However, we have launched a Make in India program in India. Okay, so this Make in India program will revamp existing manufacturing, boost exports, and it will also give a push towards India's Atmanirbharata or self-reliance. So therefore, this particular agreement will give a boost to India's Make in India and provide opportunities to young, talented workforce. And at the same time, please also understand, I have already told you that with these European Union countries, India has been enjoying a surplus trade balance. Surplus trade balance. So therefore, this free trade agreement will provide a window period. So that window period to the Indian exporters to access the large European as well as the global markets. So therefore, this could be beneficial for India to furthering or boosting Indian exports to these European markets as well as the global markets. So this Europe Free Trade Association, okay, so it is an important regional group. The Europe Free Trade Association is actually an important regional group, please understand. So this was established in the year 1960. So this was a very important regional group with several growing opportunities, right? So that could be enhancing international trade in goods and services as well. Now please understand, we wanted to internationalize ourselves. We wanted to look for the export markets across the world, and therefore European Union could be a potential destination for India's exports, and that could significantly help us further strengthen our Make in India push and generate more and more employment opportunities for our populations. So this European Free Trade Association is considered as one of the most important economic blocks in the European region. Okay, so please understand the European Union. So this is one block, and also the UK was not part of the European Union. Under Brexit, UK separated from the European Union. Apart from UK, this European Free Trade Association. So these are three important blocks for India with which India could diversify its trade. Okay, so out of three blocks, this European Free Trade Area Association is one of the most important group in Europe for India. So among this European Free Trade Association countries, specifically Switzerland is the largest trading partner for India, followed by Norway. So these are some of the facts that we need to understand with respect to European Free Trade Association. And after that, we will briefly understand the highlights of this particular agreement. So what are the highlights of this free trade agreement between India and the European Free Trade Association countries? So the Trade and Economic Partnership Agreement will give impetus to India's Make in India initiative, and at the same time the Atmanirbhar Bharat Abhiyan that was launched. Why? Because it will give impetus to the domestic manufacturing. So it will promote domestic manufacturing. So it will not just promote the domestic manufacturing, but at the same time it also provide a large employment opportunities or huge employment opportunities for India's population, right? So this particular Trade and Economic Partnership Agreement would accelerate the large number of direct jobs. So it will provide direct jobs because it ultimately deals with Make in India program, improving the manufacturing capacities. So therefore it would provide direct jobs for India's young aspirational workforce for the next 15 years. Remember, so there was a binding commitment of 100 billion worth of investment. So at the same time, it will provide a large employment opportunities for India's workforce in the next 15 years. Similarly, this particular Trade and Economic Partnership Agreement between India and the European Free Trade Association, so it facilitates the technology collaboration, access to world leading technologies in precision engineering, health sciences, renewable energy, innovation and research and development. Okay, so if you look at India, we can call it is a technology starved as well as the finance starved country. So therefore in this context, the agreements like the Trade and Economic Partnership Agreement with these developed countries is very important. It is very, very important for a country like India because it benefits India's infrastructure sector, connectivity, logistics, and the digital technologies, pharmaceutical, healthcare, education. So it benefits the number of sectors, and therefore it is in the best interest of India that India has inked this free trade agreement with all these the European Free Trade Association countries. So this is all about India and European Free Trade Association Trade and Economic Partnership Agreement, right? So next we will briefly discuss about the gig workforce or gig economy as well. So this article says gig worker suffers from lack of social security as well as regulations. Okay, so first and foremost, we will briefly understand the definition of gig workforce. Okay, so what is a gig workforce? So gig worker is an individual who is employed transactionally on a time or task-based manner, having a flexibility to choose their hours of work. So we can say, we can call them as contract workers. Okay, so we can call them as contract workers, right? So they are not working, so they're just contract workers, and they do not have the job security, or they do not have the social security. If the task of theirs is completed, there will be no relation between the employer and the gig worker. So this is actually the nature of gig worker, and because of this reason, the gig workers have a lot of concerns. Okay, so and it is not regulated, and they do not have the social security as well. Now if you look at some basic data with respect to the presence of gig workforce or the gig economy in India, around 50 million freelancers have been working across various sectors. Okay, so they have been working at various sectors. There are 50 million freelancer workers. Secondly, 90 million jobs could potentially be added by the gig economy in the near future. So why? Because rapid development of technology has been giving way for the gig economy, right? Now if you look at the app-based gig employers such as Zomato, Swiggy, Uber, Ola, so all those are employers, the gig employers in India. So because of this reason, because of a potential growth in technology in near future, there will be 90 million jobs could be created, could be potentially added by the gig economy in the near future. Okay, so however, if we break down these gig workforce, majority of these gig workers are engaged in higher skills freelancing such as IT, design management, those things or those areas. Okay, so now we will understand certain benefits and certain disadvantages of this particular gig economy or gig workers. First and foremost, the benefits are it creates jobs at a mass scale. So it creates jobs at a large scale. Now the female labor force participation is very low. However, so this particular gig economy will have a lot of potential in employing women. So thereby this can increase the female labor force participation. Okay, female labor force participation in the economy, thereby realizing their potential. Okay, so it creates jobs at a mass scale, and this is the first benefit with respect to the gig economy. And secondly, it will have a lot of freedom and flexibility to work. So this particular freedom and flexibility will ensure that one particular individual can engage in 2 or 3 different works. Okay, so that ultimately improves income. Okay, so that ultimately improves the income, and that will have a direct impact on the living standards of the people. Now, if you look at India, we have seen the problem of unemployment, right? So in this context, gig workforce or the gig economy would provide a better choice for the unemployed youth. So after that, there will be easy access to these services. Now consumers have been easily accessing these services at their fingertips. So because of this reason, because of this particular reason, there will be a potential growth in the gig economy, and more people would be employed. So after that, there will be a price advantage for the consumers as well. Okay, so because of the this particular reason, price advantage, so more and more employment would be created under the gig economy. So after that, we should also talk about the downside of the gig economy. So it also has a lot of disadvantages that have to be taken care of. So firstly, you have to understand that it is less regulated, or there is absence of regulation with respect to the gig economy. So that needs to be taken care of. After that, the gig workers have not provided social security. they are not provided the social security and even the job security as well, and that should also be taken care of. Okay, and inconsistency of services provided by the gig workers, and after that difficult to trust a service provider without the recommendation from someone you trust. So all these things are some of the downsides with the gig economy, but these are not the things that we are dealing with in this current lecture. So we are primarily dealing with the social security as well as the job security for the gig workforce. Okay, so however, in order to ensure social security and job security, there are certain challenges before the government also. For example, it is highly regulated. There are lack of policies on job structure, tax and privacy, and exponential growth of the digital economy as well as the gig economy. And the other thing is that there's lack of data. Okay, so there's lack of data with respect to the gig economy or the gig workers, and that has been making it an unregulated sector. So given here, there are few players who are engaged in the gig economy. Now, in this context, we'll briefly understand the nature of gig economy or the gig workers. So what are the challenges they have been facing? So they have been facing a numerous challenges, number of challenges. Okay, so they are considered as self-employed, and they do not have the same benefits as and protections as traditional employees. Okay, since they are considered as self-employed, they do not have the benefits and the protections. So what kind of a benefits and what kind of a protections here we are talking about? First and foremost, they lack the job security. Okay, so because they are hired on a temporary basis or they are hired on a contract basis, and once the work is done, they could be terminated at any time without giving any notice. So they will not be served any notice. So when they will not be served any notice and they can be termed at any time, how can they prepare for the future? So therefore, job security is a very important aspect, and these gig workers do not have the job security. So after that, there's a lack of social security as well, right? So social security in the sense that they lack the social safety nets. Social safety nets. So those social safety nets are very important, because these gig workers are typically not entitled benefits such as traditional employees usually enjoy, such as health insurance, paid sick leave, retirement savings plans. So those things are generally not offered to the gig workers. So because of this reason, it is said that the study has said that they lack the necessary social security, and it is also highly unregulated sector. So what the government has to do? The government should make appropriate legislations. For example, the social security. The government should provide social security. The government should make provisions about the job security of these workers, and the government should make adequate regulations that provide all these benefits: health insurance, paid sick leave, retirement savings plans, everything that could be applicable for the gig workers. Because see, gig economy will grow at an enormous pace, and it will also create a lot of gig workers. So therefore, regulation of this sector is very important. And apart from that, the government should also extend the government insurance programs. Okay, for example, the government has launched Atal Pension Yojana, Pradhan Mantri Jeevan Jyoti Bima Yojana, okay, Pradhan Mantri Suraksha Bima Yojana. So all those social security programs should be extended to cover these gig workers. Okay, so apart from that, Pradhan Mantri Garib Kalyan Yojana should also be extended to these gig workers. And ultimately, there should be a legislative framework that covers the essential aspects such as job security and social security of these gig workers, so that they can be protected. Okay, so they can be essentially protected, and social safety nets would be provided for all of them. Okay, so that's all about the gig workers and the issues they have been facing. Okay, so this is all in today's newspaper. Thank you.